a CBS reporter got attacked outside of an ICE facility in Minneapolis, covering the mostly peaceful riots. Don Lemon actually had to intervene and defend the CBS reporters. The reason why they were attacked is some of the so-called peaceful protesters, some of them actually thought that CBS was working for ICE, and that's why they attacked him. They won't be criticized for this. CBS will not criticize or even mention this publicly. This was being reported on by an independent journalist that actually put the story out. CBS will not report on such things. Yes, the agitators, the rioters, yes, they're useful idiots. That is true, but there's actually a deeper reason for that. The rioters, the crazed leftists, and the establishment, they're both totalitarians, but they're both in the sense that they're both nihilistic. Okay, so they're nihilistic totalitarians, and it's like I said, it's not just because these rioters are useful idiots. They're protected by the media, in essence. They're not being called out like any sane, common sense person would call such behavior out for what it is. It's violent behavior. It's, they're fomenting an insurrection. But it won't be reported on that. And CBS will not, mention the fact that one of the reporters was being attacked. That's because philosophically, these crazed leftists are the philosophic end result of the same philosophy. They are the next generation of nihilists, okay? So intellectually, they don't have a leg to stand on to criticize them from their standpoint, okay? So if they believe in this nihilism, they believe that, there is no reality, essentially. They believe in this baloney, right? Like 2 + 2 = 5. Yes, there's people on the top that are very powerful. They're the ones that are advocating that we're all going to eat bugs and own nothing and be happy, right? They're trying to push this neo-feudalistic system, and they're using these nihilistic people as useful idiots. Now, on the corporate level, these are the same ideology. They're also nihilists. They're not as far gone as the people on the ground, people in Minneapolis that are causing all this violence. But like I said, they can't argue with these people. They can't, because they're made of the same thing. Just like back when people started getting crazy, I think it was right around 2012, right? When all the social justice warrior thing kicked off in the major universities, which, by the way, this is where this stuff is all being taught. The professors couldn't argue against it. I remember there was some young lady yelling and screaming at one of the professors. It's like, you have a responsibility to protect us, from being triggered, by all the things that she's offended by. And the guy just stood there and be like, oh, I'm sorry. And that's because intellectually it's made of the same thing. It's just that she is taking the same ideology that the professor had. She's just taking it further. It's the same thing. The professor could not argue with it unless, he would just finally wake up and say, well, all these years I was teaching something that was really harmful. He couldn't admit that to himself. Same thing with these reporters at CBS. They can't admit to themselves that what they're protecting and what they're essentially promoting is causing the very thing that's harming them. They can't admit it, because then they would say, oh, well, I just invested myself, into something that is completely wrong, right? So the answer to this, the solution to this, is that they have to admit that they're wrong. They have to say to themselves, you know what, maybe this is not worth pushing. There is, a such thing as objective reality. In other words, reality that exists independent of whatever you think or feel it is, and go that way. This right here is going to lead to nothing but trouble. But anyway, it's a short article. I'll put a link in the description below.